with how did you get so interested in this topic? Tell me kind of the origin story of what was that. I like that moment in time where you're like, oh, this is it for me.
I'm so glad you used the word origin story because it couldn't go back any further. I grew
Yeah.
up working with my dad from the time I could walk on our farm. So I'm a farmer's son, and that is a special way of life to be part of. I knew it was special, waking up, sundown, living close to the land, working with and caring about your animals. But it was also becoming more rare, and so I grew up with that rareness and realizing that my dad was stood for something that was going by the wayside, was disappearing. And as I got older, got into business journalism, got into public policy, I began to want to explore why is that, what's happening. And so that's what really led me in that direction, is to try to answer that question that I'd really grown up with from the beginning.
How many generations on that farm?
Four generations. My sister and I are fourth generation. My sister has more talent for crops and cattle than I do, and so she's taken over from my dad, which is kind of a fun modern twist on everything. And I have just tried in finding a career off the farm and in finding my way through the world of sort of what's going on in our public sphere. I've tried to use that background and writing to try to tell our stories. I help out on the business side. They throw me in a tractor now and then, but for me, it's more about the ideas around this issue and how do we tackle the things that are impacting really every American dinner table.
I'm curious. So, what state were you in? Were you in the Midwest?
Yeah, I grew up in Wisconsin, Southwest Wisconsin.
Hmm. Hmm. And so we look at, and you're in California now, and we look at this big bread basket we've have, right? The just the whole center of California supplies food. I was surprised when I went to Dubai the first time. I love going into markets, and I saw all this packaged lettuce, and I went and there was Santa Barbara blend, and I was like, oh my God, I can't get away. So it's there's so many things happening in it. Today, we want to really focus on the technological impact on farming, but I'm also interested in the notion of I love intergenerational business, and this. Are you the last generation that's going to do it, or is it feels like it's a thin curve going diminishing returns?
It is thinning. I think our family is one that's going to try to hold on for as many more generations as we can.
Okay.
We grew up with a middle class living, I was lucky to say, in the 80s and 90s, and my parents were able to help me get through college. I was the first in our family to go to college.
Oh,
I was also the first eldest son in our family to not farm, and I carried that around for many years. My sister taking over is a beautiful thing. She has kids, and we are really hoping and working to make sure that we can continue to persist for each generation. But to your point, it's thinning because it's getting harder and harder. And that middle class living that I grew up with has been slipping away. Similar to the Rust Belt kind of notion that you
right,
see in the
right,
Midwest. But
right.
to your point, it's true everywhere. And I live now, I split my time between Moraga, California, nearby, Santa Barbara, of course, and then relatively speaking, and then the family farm back in Wisconsin. And walking between those worlds and seeing agriculture in all these parts of the country, I'm amazed at the resilience. I'm also alarmed by that which is slipping away. And, as we're here to talk about today, particularly in the case of technology, that affects all of our food.
So on one hand, as much as we've had lots of folks talking about this on the show, technology has helped us get, improve yields and improve distribution of everything that we need. So it feels like from an efficiency point of view, we've gotten better. Um, I'm curious though, just for some reason, what's the dark side of that coin?
Yeah, you're right. It is a very large, sharp, double-edged sword. And when I was working on my book, Land Rich, Cash Poor, investigating different hidden eras of the disappearance of our farms, I dove in on technology and I've really not let it go. And I've continued to investigate it since and deepen that. And what happened could not be a more dramatic story of great successes and great threats to our farms and to our food supply. So to your point on yields, it has made it possible for us to get more food and fiber per acre and per animal. It's made it possible for more farms to take on more acreage and more animals with fewer people breaking their backs to do it. To a point, that was a good thing. That was mankind advancing. More food, more affordably, and other people able to go off into the economy and do other things rather than everyone growing their food. We take those things for granted. That was technology that did that. The flip side of it is that we made a choice in this country, and I think it was in many ways an unknowing, unwitting choice. But in
Hmm.
the 1970s and 1980s, there was a change that we missed. So for a long time, there was an issue going on in our economy where people were leaving the farm to go to the factory, to go to the city. There were a lot of reasons for
Hmm.
that, but better wages was one of them. So we needed technology at that time. In addition to feeding our country, we needed technology that made it possible for farms to be able to produce more food with fewer people. That was something that was needed to a point. People
Okay.
would say that those that are concerned about the loss of small farms today would say that went too far. That's a related discussion. But what happened is, we got to the 70s and 80s, we didn't need to do that anymore. The wages caught up. And so there wasn't a need to help farms take on more and get bigger anymore from that standpoint. We missed that moment. And what that meant is we continued moving forward with technology that really left small and medium-sized farms behind. We continued with technology that tilted the scales toward large farms. If we would have made a choice at that point to say, okay, we don't have to do this anymore. We can have scale neutral technology where large, medium, and small farms can all afford to invest in a version of this technology. They can apply it to their operations. We could have continued to have farms of all sizes and types able to innovate on into the future. And instead, the innovation really left behind those small, medium-sized farms. It's not the only thing that has led
Because
to
of
the
expense.
Exactly, exactly. It's called penciling it out. If my dad, he's got to have a new piece of technology pencil out if he's going to buy it. He's got to be able to see, oh, it'll be a 5 year, 10 year payback, that kind of thing. That started slipping away. And when that began
Hmm.
to slip away, it was one of many factors that made so many of our farms disappear to the tune of 45,000 farms per year on an average annual basis for the past century.
For the past century.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who picked up all the slack? Because we're still eating.
That's right. That's absolutely right. It is in some cases, in many cases, it is the larger farms on that spectrum that were able to continue to innovate. It is those farms, they're the smallest proportion of our farms, but they provide the largest portion of our food. There's also food imports. And then there are still farms that are medium and smaller that have made it, but they aren't providing ongoing, full income to a household. You got where I'm from, and it's different everywhere, but where I'm from, it's people who are pulling factory shifts, pouring concrete, working construction jobs, and operating a farm. So it's a second or third job for them.
Got it. I'm But there's so much here. I'm I'm curious. One of the things that happens, and I wonder if it's happened here, is big ag comes in and buys up all the farms and then builds these, coalitions. They amalgamate all of these small farmers. I know that's happened here. Driscoll has done that with all the berry farmers. So they're still working. They've got a bigger, I think, access to technology and things like that and resources that a large company has. They may lose control, but they're still farming, still making food. Has How much of that has impacted small to medium farms?
That is a legitimate aspect of this. And I also say that, big farms get bigger trying to make it too, and people have to remember there's economic realities and pressures that create that. Some like that and are okay with it, some don't. It can be controversial, but we have to remember that there are market forces and technology is one of them. That's happening some, but the thing that we lose as we have farms that aren't necessarily owned and operated quite as often by the people who live on them is we lose that small economic diversity. And so that gets us to the issue of how does this affect our food supply? So during COVID was the most dramatic example, but it also happens anytime there's an outbreak of bird flu or different
Right.
issues, different disasters. We have a constriction of our food supply. And it's not because any farmers aren't doing a good job or working hard and they're not making more money when the food price goes up. What happens is we have our supply chain shut down either in full, like it did in COVID, or in kind of spot fires. And since we have larger operations from farms to distribution companies to, food processors to retailers and on through, it's easier for a disaster to disrupt a large part of that supply chain because if you
Mhm,
take out one of those
mhm.
links, it's a big link. And so we lose that ability to distribute our food through many small channels. And so then you have these tragic situations where farmers of any type and size are trying to sell their food can't find a place to do it. They're not making money. The consumer is looking for food in the grocery store. It's higher priced. They can't get the options they want. So those constrictions, and we're more vulnerable to that every single day with every farm that we lose.
I'm also a big fan of multi-generational issues because we now have 5 generations for the first time that we're all connected through our cell phones. It feels like, right? Every grandpa's got them all the way down to the 7 year olds are connecting.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the things that's interesting started with millennials for sure, with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They want to understand the provenance of food, and there's this kind of, I don't want big ag. I'm going to go to the farmer's market. It feels more like when I was a hippie in the late '60s. But it was true. We wanted food that was local because we saw we were supporting local small farms. And so I know here we've got like the third largest farmers market in the state, and it's a big deal here, but I know that's not true everywhere. Is that notion of craft foods, if you will, is that, I mean, you write about this, so is that prevalent in America? Do we see a trend going up in that, or is that a coastal thing?
There is a great interest in it that is spreading more than ever, especially post-COVID. I always joke that we need to get more of the farmers and the hippies together. And in California, you see that, and it's a good, strong local food movement. We have places in this country, including where I'm from, where there's all this land to grow food, and people don't really buy their food in that way. So, and also they may not have local grocery stores anymore. They might need to drive 30, 40 miles to get there. So there's ironically food deserts in some places where there's plenty of land to grow food. And the technology question, the technology that kind of betrayed us because we missed that moment in the 70s and 80s, also can help fix this. So, to your point, there are more people than ever, including in places like where I'm from, all over the country, more interested than ever in where their food comes from. We need to seize that moment. And we need to jump onto technologies that are scale neutral, that can make it possible for more farms to grow more types of food in more areas, because that can fix this Gordian knot that we're stuck in and make it so that more of the types of food purchasing options you're talking about that you see in California can be occurring in more places.
I'm shocked when uh, we just had a gathering of storytellers here, and they were blown away at the food. And I was like, wait, one lady had never seen, literally had not had a fig before. And I was like, how do you not have figs? But then I remember, that we're surrounded by things. It makes me want to understand what you mean by scale neutral.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a couple examples that illustrated the best one, or one of the best ones is maybe something called gene editing. And so, science can be very interesting and scary. So sometimes people hear this one and they think Dolly the sheep being cloned, or they saw videos online of square watermelons. It can do strange things. But when we have open, transparent discussions of this science, we can weed out what we do and don't want. And in gene editing, it's really worth doing. So what it is it's taking the genes of a current crop, a type of seed, and editing, just changing small elements of it. It's kind of like years ago when they created hybrid corn, which,
Yeah,
crossed
sure, 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 sure.
more places. It's like that. But you make an adjustment to a crop that, let's say, grapes. Grapes have been a huge boon for farmers in California that couldn't continue to do dairy or something else. They plant grapes, they're able to supply this booming industry. So what if you could grow more varieties of grapes in more places, and it could be just as good a quality, but more places, more climates, more types of ground? That would be a whole new generation of grapes and wine in this country. And it would be a whole new generation of opportunity for farms and a whole new generation of options for consumers. Now, think about that with all crops or many crops. So, if we could do that, it is a technology that exists, but it right now is only done with a few different types of oils, soybeans, and different things. There isn't a lot of wide application of it. If our country invested in research and development in the private sector and the public sector to try to unleash that and find more ways for it to be commercially viable, imagine what we could do with those farms that selling corn and hay doesn't do it for them anymore, and they don't know what else to sell because they don't have any place they can take artisan tomatoes or specialty wheat. But if suddenly these markets are opening up, it's more market opportunities for farms. It's more choices for consumers. It's lower prices for consumers over time as well because their choices are not as constrained, especially during disasters.
So if I'm gene editing, I grew up around orchidologists, and so I'm used to them making all kinds of hybrids. That's was very common to for whatever reason they were doing it.
Yeah,
And it is does that then make the grape a GMO'd grape?
that's a great question. It really depends upon the type and the style that they're going about it, but it can. And I think that the thing to remember is that this is such a young technology, and there are so many different directions it could go, so many different applications it could go, so many ways we could safeguard against any of the concerns that there might be. And the upsides are tremendous. And the reason it's scale neutral is because it's once it's developed, it's as simple as a farmer buying a different type of seed. And in fact, it can be more affordable because there's more types of seeds and more places to buy them from. And so that's why it's scale neutral. The big farms, medium and small could all do it and all could be experimenting in these new areas.
So educate us on like if GMO has a big stink on it, big time, right? Yet what you're talking about is creating opportunity for people, and it doesn't feel like I'm getting less product or a weird product or anything like that. How do we reframe that conversation quickly? Because I'm running out of time.
I think the key is that it opens up the ability for the farmer and the consumer to be closer. Part of the problem with GMO or any of these other things is people are like, I don't know what's in my food. I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know what's going on. This is a technology that makes it more possible for you to buy more food from the farmer down the road or within your regional economy. So it increases the amount of information and knowledge that we have, which would actually counteract some of the fear that can occur around science and often, in a founded way.
Yeah, I think it feels like people like you who are writing about this, and hopefully this platform gets this word out there so people again can become educated. Brian, thank you so much for joining us at TEDx Santa Barbara. And you're one of the disruptors and influencers out there who's helping us understand. We'd love to, if anything you write, let us know. We'll let our audience know.
Well, thank you. We need to change that status quo. I appreciate you guys raising these issues.